Picture this. Two men, born under the exact same sky. We're looking at history's very first brotherhood, which also happens to be the very first mirror of a divided humanity. Today, we're going to dive into this explainer and explore a story that totally transcends ancient history. It's a profoundly human character study about envy, faith, and the absolute tragic collapse of intimacy.
You know, there's this brilliant line from our source material. The fracture of Eden now enters fraternity. The sin and separation that originally broke humanity's relationship with God, well, it didn't just magically disappear. It migrated. It moved directly into the family home. That fracture shifted from the relationship between humanity and God straight into the incredibly intimate relationship between brother and brother. Section 1. Shadows of a Lost Eden. Life Outside Paradise.
Let's stop and think about the shared reality these two brothers actually lived in. I mean, they had the exact same blood, the same family, and they were shaped by the exact same exile under a cursed ground. Both of them were nourished by their parents' memories of a paradise they never even got to see themselves. And because every single external factor was perfectly identical, it proves a really haunting truth. The deepest division in human life is never merely environmental. It is fundamentally spiritual. Evil and righteousness can literally arise under the exact same roof.
And this shared reality brings us to a fascinating psychological starting point for the older brother. Just think about the burden of primacy for a second. In the ancient world, the firstborn carries an immense, invisible weight. Cain was first in line, first in his parents' hopes. His very existence was loaded with this intense, Edenic longing from his mother Eve, this silent, crushing pressure to be the promised seed that might somehow redeem his parents' fall. That is a massive, invisible burden to carry around.
Moving to Section 2. Two altars, two hearts, the psychology of division. So we have two offerings rising from the exact same family, yet they carry completely different inner worlds. This is a deeply existential difference, not just an agricultural one. Cain brought the visible result of his labor. He essentially approached God through production. It was an offering of output, maybe as a way to preserve his ego. But Abel brought the first and the best. His offering was marked by surrendered trust. He approached through consecration. It was an offering of self. The exact same ritual revealed two entirely different hearts.
And here is where it gets absolutely heartbreaking, because the true tragedy isn't simply that Abel's offering was favored. As the quote goes, "Brotherhood survives only where another's blessing can still be received as joy rather than threat." The real tragedy is that Cain experienced his own brother's acceptance as a personal diminishment. The very moment one brother's grace becomes the other's humiliation, the whole family collapses from the inside out.
You can actually trace this tragic psychological descent step by step. It's what we call the anatomy of relational disintegration. It starts with comparison, right? Which then filters through wounded pride. Then, that pride kind of ferments into this silent internal accusation, and ultimately, it erupts into violence. Cain stopped seeing Abel as a brother and saw only a rival. Intimacy, miraculously and tragically transforms into absolute hostility.
What makes this contrast so intensely painful is that Abel becomes this unbearable moral mirror. Abel actually doesn't say a word, nothing at all. Yet his life and his accepted offering silently reveal what Cain absolutely refuses to confront, that the issue is not the ritual itself, but the condition of the heart performing it. The brother nearest to him becomes the one person he can least tolerate.
Section 3. The Death of Brotherhood. Blood in the Field.
I really want you to let this sink in for a moment. History's first battlefield is brotherhood. The very first human death on record didn't happen between warring nations, rival tribes, or strangers across some border. It happened within a family.
And the location, it's deeply symbolic. The field, it's the external stage of the family's internal fracture. What first broke invisibly inside Cain's wounded heart finally spills visibly into the dirt of the ancient earth. That invisible resentment suddenly takes a physical, material, and horribly permanent form.
Now, look at Abel's response, or actually, scratch that, his lack of a response. He doesn't resist. He doesn't retaliate. He doesn't even speak. He becomes the first martyr of proximity. It's this haunting testimony that fallen humanity will so often seek to destroy the very thing that most clearly reminds it of the righteous path it chose not to take. But here's the thing, death is not the end of Abel's voice. Truth often becomes louder after persecution. Even though Abel is struck down, his blood cries from the ground. This gives us the very first prophetic assurance in history that innocent slain is never spiritually erased. Righteousness doesn't simply disappear just because it's attacked.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the blueprint of history, the endless echo.
Because this single fractured field, it actually becomes the grand blueprint for all of sacred history. This brother pattern repeats endlessly. We see it in Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, Joseph and his brothers, all the way down to Saul and David. It is this perpetual, recurring tension of the righteous being rejected, ultimately culminating in Christ himself, rejected by those whose identity simply could not bear his light.
Essentially, these two brothers establish two perpetual streams of human existence. You have the way of Cain, which is a line of self-assertion. It's religion without surrender, trying to build civilization in cities over unresolved blood, just to preserve the ego. And then you have the faith of Abel. That's a line of moral transparency, yielding the self, engaging in true worship, and remaining faithful even when it becomes profoundly dangerous.
And finally, Section 5, the echo within us, the mirror of the human heart. Because, let's be honest, Cain and Abel are so much more than just ancient historical figures. They are literally interior possibilities fighting within each of us right now. It's a perpetually modern story. Families still fracture today when comparison replaces love. Communities still divide when the hunger for recognition overpowers the truth. Whenever another person's blessing awakens gratitude in you, Abel lives. But whenever another person's grace awakens painful envy, that is Cain beginning to stir.
So, I want to leave you with this profound, really haunting question. Which brother is being formed within us when another person receives the blessing we deeply desire? Think about that internal mirror for a while. Thank you so much for exploring this profound historical blueprint with me in this explainer. Keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.